It's Friday, March 1st, David, and the first of the month is always an excellent time for our viewers to join us on Patreon.com. This show would not be possible without the support of our generous sponsors, and they can see us on Patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards. That, David, of course, is your Patreon page, and I do hope that our viewers who are regularly watching on patreon.com/crowdsource the truth will also sponsor you. And being the first of the month, this is a great time to get on there. David has lots of exclusive content that's only available on patreon.com/reverse CSI storyboards, including blog posts and the videos that he and I create. I also want to remind everyone that they can join Crowdsource the Truth's Patreon page at patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. And there's also subscribestar.com/crowdsource the truth. You know, David, I've been speaking with some of the guests that create exclusive subscriber-only shows with me, like yourself, and there's been a suggestion that I raise the minimum sponsorship on Crowdsource the Truth at least to $2 per month, because some people feel, some of the guests feel that this is de-incentivizing sponsors from joining some of the other pages because they feel like they can watch everything on Crowdsource the Truth. But of course, you've got exclusive content on your page, and I hope that people will co-sponsor each of my guests. How are you today, David?
I'm very well, Jason.
It's good to see you as always. We have a lot of exciting material to cover today. I also want to remind people, David, that you and I spend quite a lot of time preparing this material, researching it, etc. But of course, we are not trying to mimic the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, or anything like that. We've been doing a crowdsource investigation. You used to refer to it as cloud-centric investigation. It's basically the same sort of thing. We examine anomalies, we look at technological signatures of unsolved crimes, and we start to put in place possible explanations, hypotheses based on patents and specific technologies, opening the field, pardon the pun, to crowdsource viewers to give us information. And it seems that one of the most prolific lately has been an expert in simulation hacking of information technology. I think he's trying to somehow thwart us by alerting all of these people. But people will remember, David, it's only 3 months ago that we celebrated your Christmas spectacular with a wonderful in-person meeting with Wilbur Ross. I would welcome conversations with any of the people that our favorite IT guru, the simulation hacking IT guru, has been contacting.
Well, it's quite amazing the relevance that this man, David Sweigert, has to our endeavors, because in his attempt to, I don't know whether he's attempting to shut us down, he's not going to succeed. He's writing to lots of people, and he's misrepresenting my language, and probably yours as well, in what he writes. So, for example, let me just point out the importance of what are known as ground truths when you're trying to analyze through remote sensing technology. A ground truth might be, for example, as far as crime scene investigations is concerned, the spot under the left ear, I think, of JonBenet Ramsey that looks to be like a taser mark. Now, when they've done the analysis of what happened to JonBenet Ramsey, they don't seem to point out that she was, and sorry to be brutal, but that she'd been sodomized. Her skull was cracked almost completely around. There was a very elaborate knotted garrote around her throat, and this mark under her left ear, which looks to me like a taser mark. Now, I believe each of those clues are vitally important to eventually finding out who killed her. But each one of them, unless they're rebutted through some other way, represent a ground truth. So whatever one's theory of the death of JonBenet Ramsey or Princess Diana or Michael Hastings, you have to take the facts at the crime scene and then work backwards to see if the model of the criminal that actually perpetrated the act fits with the ground truth. So coming back to Mr. Sweigert, I consider the letter he writes to, let's say, Maxine Brown, Director of Computer Science, the Electronic Visualization Lab, University of Illinois at Chicago, dated February the 20th of 2009. The subject that he puts in, it's 3 lines, and I'll read it in a minute, represents a ground truth. That is, it's Mr. Sweigert's statement, unless he rebuts it and says, well, I didn't write that, but I think he did. And it says something very specific, which I didn't say, incidentally. So he says, this is the subject, the misuse of NSF-acquired technologies. Now, I've never used that phrase, right? Now, it may be that the evil Batcave is financed with technology supplied or funded by the National Science Foundation, but I didn't say so. I think it's funded by a criminal group, but that's by the by. The misuse of NSF-acquired technologies to facilitate the high-speed transfer of snuff films. Again, I've never used the phrase high-speed transfer of snuff films, but I believe it's highly relevant to what Sweigert is writing because it's his interpretation based on his own career as a simulation hacking information technology guru. I really apologize about the acronym, but if the cap fits, wear it. I would say it's not so much the high-speed transfer of snuff films. As a result of my research, it's probably the bit spreading, latency independent transfer of information that can be reconstituted into a snuff film of the type described by Dr. Thomas Barnett, a Naval War College guru, not a guru, I hope, like David Sweigert is a guru, but a guru nonetheless, who described the events of 9/11, in particular as it related to people jumping out of the North Tower and splatting themselves on the pavement, the first live broadcast mass snuff film in human history. Now, those are Dr. Barnett's words. So why doesn't Sweigert sue him if he's particularly challenged by the notion of snuff films being transmitted over these elaborate networks? Back to the phrase of Thomas Barnett, the first live broadcast mass snuff film in human history. You as an expert in cinematography, if that's the right word, I won't call you guru because perhaps we're clouding the concept of guru-ness, that it actually requires a very elaborate national or global organization to produce the first live broadcast mass snuff film in human history. And lo and behold, if I continue with this subject line from Sweigert, the high-speed transfer of snuff films via the UIC Electronic Visualization Laboratory, EVL. So here this guru has actually given us all the words consistent with his perception of what we're saying that match his career experience because he is a guru in S.H.I.T. Right?
Exactly.
Now, so then, as you know, and our listeners know, and again, I really hope our subscribers understand what we're up against. And let me just point out what we're up against. In terms of financing, the organization that attacked America on 9/11 and caused nearly 3,000 deaths met, I believe, on the 47th floor of the North Tower as the shareholders of the British company Serco, about 105 of them, probably together with their investment banker, N.M. Rothschild and Sons representative, which may well have been Wilbur Ross, the gentleman that you interviewed the other day, or some weeks back, who said that the United States Patent Office was an independent arm of government. And whilst you knew, and I knew, that Serco had processed the 4 millionth patent for the United States Patent and Trademark Office on the 15th of November of last year, and that particular patent was a Raytheon patent. And to celebrate what Raytheon could do with that patent, they showed an example of the 3D laser reconstituted scene at Ground Zero, which of course is a wasteland, but I digress. So going back to Mr. Sweigert, I think he's pointed us to his belief that he actually agrees with us. right? That it's only something like the Electronic Visualization Laboratory at the University of Illinois, Chicago, linked through to the IT partnerships, here's that ugly IT term again, of Northwestern University, where resides one of the leading experts in torture paradigms and practice by the name of Bernardine Dawn, who groomed, as I understand it, perhaps I'm being naive, Barack Hussein Obama and Michelle Obama for their career that eventually took them into the White House. But she's the leader of the Weather Underground organization, and I believe that organization still exists. It's buried within the Teachers Pension Fund, together with Bill Ayers, who was on faculty at the University of Illinois in Chicago. So going round and round, I think it's very interesting. And I'd like to thank Mr. Sweigert. I think he's really trying. But he also, right, he also may be trying to get ahead of what is inevitably coming in his direction, which would be an action for wrongful death, if we're correct, against the custodians of the patents that we use to execute and conceal the attack of 9/11.
Would you call that, David, an S.H.I.T storm headed his way, perhaps?
Yes, a storm. Yes. And let me just talk about a little, if I may, the particular patent that you and I have focused on relatively recently. And after all, I think we can be excused in finding that particular patent because, after all, Serco has processed 4 million patents.
Veritable needle in a haystack, David.
It's a needle in a haystack, so you have to use keywords, and you have to get familiar with the terminology of wannabe forensic economists, right?
Oh, you've reminded me of something that we'll go into in a moment.
Yes, yes. And you see, apparently these dorks are worried about me referring to myself as a forensic economist. But forensic economics, when I invented the term, or I thought I invented the term in Canada, I didn't know of any organization relating to the Professional Society of Forensic Economics. But apparently there is one in the United States, and I believe you're going to come and talk to us a little bit about that.
Yes.
But for me, forensic economics is about people who want to bring the ground truths of a crime scene or a fraud scene into court and argue from the fact base, if you see what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So one of the fact bases that we might be talking about in the case of forensic economics is the one where as little as possible, if that's the right grammar, of the evidence is wasted. So relatively recently, I've coined, or I've done a riff on the second law of thermodynamics, which people might be interested to know in expression, is that energy is neither lost nor gained in a process, but some energy is always wasted. And I thought, wow, actually, that's what I've been thinking about for years in the case of cloud-centric crime scene investigation, is that if you substitute the word evidence for energy, the second law applies. That is to say, evidence is never lost nor gained at a crime scene investigation, but some evidence is always wasted. And such evidence might be, for example, what appears to be a taser mark under the ear of little JonBenet Ramsey, the fact that the road by the collision pillar for Princess Diana in Paris in August the 31st, 1997, there are no brake marks on the road, there are only yaw marks, which is suggestive of a technology called, I don't know, follower leader technology, invented by, would you believe, ITT. If you take the Pentagon or the Michael Hastings case, there's evidence strewn around the crime scene, which could be or should be or must be ground truthed against the theory of the accident or the crash. So I've recently, and then I'll let you come in there, I've recently added a avatar to my attempts to produce pilot scripts for people working from inside the evil Batcave on reverse engineering. And I call that avatar Simpson, for reasons we obviously, Sim.
No relation to Tyrone Simpson.
Well, exactly. The beauty of that Simpson, it actually provides me with an avatar who might be very useful for tracking down the guru of simulation hacking and information technology, and what his role might have been in switching off the protection systems during the continuity of government exercise on 911, when a simulation exercise was switched to live fire, resulting in the death of nearly 3,000 Americans. Over to you.
Well, David, I'm glad you brought all those things up. And something that I've discovered over the comparatively short time I've been on this planet is that there's a subtlety to language, and what people say is very important. There's a certain highly objectionable Brit living in Poland who injected himself into this situation much in the same way Mr. Sweigert has. I never heard of Sweigert, as I'm sure you didn't, or this British guy, until those two individuals took it upon themselves to view this YouTube channel and start to participate in the narrative by making up fake stories, issuing false claims, false accusations, twisting what we say, attributing things that other people say to us, and then trying to create these civil legal actions in some effort to put you or I, particularly me at this point, in financial jeopardy. And I think it's their true hope to introduce process crimes in these civil suits, much in the same way that the despicable Robert Mueller has done in the case of Michael Cohen, in the case of Dr. Jerome Corsi, Roger Stone, so many of the people surrounding President Trump, that he's trying to get indicted so he can have leverage over them. I think that's what these guys are trying to achieve, is leverage to get us to stop talking about this, because I welcome conversations with each of these people. And you know, David, when you say that you invented forensic economics, or you thought you did, I'm reminded of a professor that I had at NYU Film School, and I'm going to show a little bit from her public webpage here. I haven't spoken to this woman in 25 years. I was a freshman and I took an animation class at NYU, and the teacher was this woman, Lori Loeb, who's a very experienced animator and filmmaker, and this is the first time I've really thought about her in many years, because what you said just reminded me of what she said on the very first day of class there at NYU Film School, Introduction to Animation. She said she invented animation. Seemed impossible, right? This woman wasn't nearly as old as Walt Disney, but her explanation was that no one ever taught her how animation worked. She just, from understanding how a film camera worked, came to the conclusion that if she drew a succession of images that appeared to be in sequence and then filmed them one frame at a time, the result would be the simulation of motion, the creation of animation. So as a child, when she came up with this with her 8mm film camera, she had invented animation as far as she knew. And as you've told us, you've clarified the statement. You now know that there is, in the United States, a National Association of Forensic Economists. So rather than listening to the ramblings of a very probably mentally disturbed, really someone who deserves our pity, he's got these blue glasses to prevent him from having seizures. So I do honestly believe, I'm not trying to disparage the man, I think he needs to be under close supervision of a mental health professional, rather than making videos on YouTube spewing nonsense that's undoubtedly going to get him into legal jeopardy. I decided to call the National Association of Forensic Economists, and I spoke with the executive director, Mark Weinstein, because I wanted to get a better understanding of this. You know, there have been accusations that you've claimed to be a PhD, and when we showed that to be false, you've never made that claim. Then they move the goalpost and they say, oh no, we meant that his claim of being a forensic economist necessitates that he would, of course, be a PhD. This is also untrue. I don't believe that there's any need for a forensic economist to hold a PhD, but I don't know anything about forensic economics, so I called and spoke with Mark Weinstein. David, may I play that short interview for you now?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's have everybody give a listen to this. Hello?
Yeah, who's calling?
This is Jason Goodman calling. I got your phone number off of the NAFE website, the National Association of Forensic Economists. So I have a talk show on YouTube, And one of my associates is very interested in the field of forensic economics, and I was just wondering, to join the NAFE, does one need to be a PhD? Like, what are the qualifications to be a forensic economist?
Well, technically, you don't have to be a PhD,
Uh-huh.
but I guess you follow the rules of evidence from civil procedure, federal rules of evidence. Person greater than layman, but that's more or less for testifying purposes.
Well, what
I
if
guess
someone's
there are
just, sorry to interrupt, but what if somebody's just interested in the field and observing, the actions and studying it from, I mean, can anyone join? Is it the type of thing that someone can be kind of an amateur forensic economist and just watch it and learn from it?
Absolutely. We encourage anybody to join, and that gets access to our journal, access to our member-only website, and access to our listserv, where anyone could follow along in the conversation and or participate in the conversation.
That's what I thought. That made sense to me because, like, I'm a cinematographer by trade, but I'm not a member of the, American Society of Cinematographers, and I don't have a degree in cinematography. But yet, when I engage in the act of making motion pictures, I am a cinematographer. Is it kind of a similar thing to the forensic, just in terms of studying the field?
That's correct. Yeah, right. So clearly, there's people that calculate damages with respect to litigation that may not be members and are technically practicing forensic economics. But then there's people that are members and keep up with the research and keep up with the actual profession.
Right. Excellent. All right. Well, I'll share this information with him. Thank you very much, Mark.
Sounds
Pretty
good. Have a great
interesting
day.
interview,
You too.
isn't it, David?
Bye.
Now, that is absolutely fascinating, Jason. So let me, if I may, I want to make a number of comments that relate
Sure.
to my long-term goals with you. So I go back to, I was a pretty good, I got a scholarship at Queen's College, Cambridge in my second year in taking my mechanical sciences degree when I got a first-class honors. And Queen's College gave me a scholarship for what I felt were my strongest subjects, which was applied mathematics and thermodynamics. And so I'm much older now, so I've forgotten a lot more than probably I ever knew. But in the particular field of thermodynamics, which is the science, I sometimes say, of hot air, waste, and chaos. So our guru of S.H.I.T might be a classic target for a thermodynamics analysis, but I'm being frivolous. But backing up, so the second law of thermodynamics can be expressed as energy is neither lost nor gained in a process, but some energy is always wasted. So that gentleman who said anyone who is bringing evidence in civil litigation into court could be described as a forensic economic, if I understood him correctly. It's not a professional qualification. So I have a son who's absolutely brilliant at looking at car crashes and accidents, and in his head he can reconfigure what probably happened at such an accident scene. I can go past an accident, I look at it, and there's bits of metal all over the place. My son can say, oh, that car went left and that car went right, and it was doing about 20 miles an hour. So that's for me, I would say that's a forensic economic skill, because if he went into court and described what probably happened, then you could ground truth his assertions, right? And perhaps one of the litigants could bring in a claim for careless driving or wrongful death. If you see, the whole field of reference for what I called forensic economics really relates to whether you can bring litigation evidence into a court with a fact pattern that would justify a claim for damages or the dismissal for claim of damages. So when I talk about evidence, I look at these major crime scenes and I say, well, what we need to do is teach young people, and older people for that matter, when they go to universities and they sit in an evil bat cave and watch what they described as artwork, which is battlefield torture, climate change, and immersive narrative. And that garbage is being propagated while we speak over the evil Batcave network through to the Northwestern University Information Technology Partnerships, right? Now, I believe that is the vehicle for delivering the first live broadcast mass snuff film in human history. And in order to prove it, we need students inside the Batcave looking at what their teachers say is fundamental to the survival of the planet, including preventing catastrophic anthropogenic global warming emitted from the mouth of David Sweigert. Because he, unfortunately for his near relatives, I don't know whether he's got halitosis, and of course that's a cheap shot, he's emitting carbon dioxide at the rate of 40,000 parts per million. And that's way above what a teacher on the faculty of University of Chicago said is permissible, because when that teacher, and you'll be able to guess his name fairly soon, went to Copenhagen for one of those climate change raves, if you will, he said, or he was told to say, that we've got to bring the carbon dioxide parts per million in the Earth's atmosphere below 350 parts per million.
Was that Bill Ayers?
No, it's Barack Hussein Obama.
Ah.
Who was groomed at Sidley Austin with Michelle Lavaugn Robinson, that somewhat dubious party that's espoused to Barack Hussein Obama. And she was on the University of Chicago Medical Hospitals as the Vice President of Community Relations, which is a very sort of Alinskyite job, but she was on $315,000 a year, and she was breathing out carbon dioxide at the rate of 40,000 parts per million. So these clowns, what we really need is an informed and educated student body that can describe itself as a forensic or forensic economics, because they are ground truthing the assertions of the teachers community in the United States, which includes Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dawn, Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton from their 1970s period at Georgetown University, and Barack Hussein Obama and Michelle Lavaugn Robinson at the University of Chicago. And these people are on the Teachers Pension Fund, which met on the 47th floor of the North Tower. So I'm going round and around a bit, you see, but what I'm saying is, if we can get the students, and I think you and I are the catalyst, to understand that one of the most exciting simulation things they could ever do is go into battle with this dark force of money and power and greed and cynicism that met on the 47th floor, and reverse engineer it and bring some of these people into court, civil litigation, don't try and prove murder one, and sue them for damages as a result of the simulation that you do in the evil Batcave for causing the wrongful death of nearly 3,000 Americans, or Princess Di, using their custody or misusing their custody of various patented devices. Over to you.
Yeah, and certainly what we're suggesting is that many of these things are possible given the fact that they're all sort of connected to this federal bridge, which is something I never heard of before you started telling me about it, David. And I mean, again, in the Alinsky-esque spirit of taking something that somebody else has said and attributing it to you or I, or just straight making up a lie and repeatedly telling it to people, the theory that we're exploring is that someone could infiltrate this federal bridge and access various sensitive networks and computer resources and patented technologies and initiate various things by infiltrating this computer network. And one of the criticisms we've received is that you or I don't know anything about this, but the amazing and ironic thing is that we don't need to. We are just a hub. We are here asking questions. And when I ask a question of someone who does know quite a bit about, let's say, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, such as Wilbur Ross, we can gauge his answer. So the latest thing that our overactive and under-informed adversaries seem to be preparing to do is to inform Christopher Hyman of our investigation. He's the former CEO of Serco Group. I would welcome a conversation with Mr. Hyman or his attorneys. Would love to speak to him. He's certainly a public figure. He is the CEO of a company that seems very involved in a lot of scandals and has access to technologies that certainly could link them to any of these things. Now, as I understand it, David, the standard procedure in journalism, which people could call what we're doing journalism. They could call it academic study. They could call it, what's that? Forensic economics. They could call it an edutainment program focused on forensic economics and crime scene investigation, whatever we want to call it. If we've said anything incorrect or defamatory about Mr. Hyman or anyone on the show, the first reasonable step for someone to take, should they want to pursue a legitimate legal action, would be to alert us of the actual facts that perhaps we've missed, request a retraction, and then if we should fail to retract false statements, then perhaps a defamation lawsuit would be adequate. But it seems that they are more interested in putting out false information and jumping to conclusions, no matter how many times we provide the information that what they're saying is wrong. Part of the reason I stopped officially listening to this really disturbing, overweight, tattooed British slob is that he called me and immediately said, "You're lying to me." So, you know, just like when Lori Loeb told me she invented animation in 1990, that's when she told me. She presumably had invented it in the 60s or the 70s, but obviously animation has been around for much longer than that. I knew what she was saying couldn't possibly be correct, but I didn't immediately presume she was lying. I thought there might be some subtlety to what she was saying, or perhaps some aspect of it that I didn't fully understand. So anyone who stood up in the class and would have accused her of lying would have been incorrect. She wasn't lying. She had a subtle way of explaining something.
Yeah, and if I may, could you go back to the Federal Bridge? Because what I believe Sweigert has done, either because he's negligent, reckless, willful, or even at the extreme maybe proved to be fraudulent, and I'm not assuming he is fraudulent. If you zoom in and you look at the state of Illinois, just on the left, over on the left, you see, I think the mens rea for the attack of 9/11 came through the state of Illinois. Now, the state of Illinois is one of the partners of the Northwestern University IT partnerships, together with the city of Chicago. Well, as I understand it, the city of Chicago is the most corrupt city in the United States of America, and the state of Illinois is amongst the most corrupt states, where 4 of the last 7 governors have been to jail for a variety of crimes, including racketeering, which I believe Mr. Sweigert is being involved in, but I don't think you've got the resources or the inclination to be a really good racketeer. Nothing personal, Jason.
He's accused me of that. Yes, he has accused me.
He's not got onto me yet. But
I think he's in Canada now. I think he's stalking you, David. He's making videos in various restaurants and hotels talking about coming after you and financing civil litigation based on false statements. I wonder if that's legal to do.
Well, you know, it's irrelevant, because I think the bigger situation is where I believe our subscribers, and I am appealing again to our subscribers, to, I think, recognize that we are up against an extraordinarily powerful, well-resourced organization. And if we are just summarizing it as the members of shareholder groups associated with Serco that met on the 47th floor of the North Tower, probably in the company of their investment banker, N.M. Rothschild and Sons Limited, which is the 5th oldest British bank, where for 25 years, as I understand it, in New York, their senior representative for debt restructuring was one Wilbur Ross, who provided his debt restructuring services to one President Donald Trump, when Trump, I think, was in a hole of around $4 billion in 1990. So the question you should always ask with lenders is, when do they migrate into loan sharking status? That is to say, they make a loan with some collateralized debt obligation on the president or the future president of the United States. Maybe they're collecting now. Anyway, back to the 47th floor on the morning of 9/11. You've got Christopher Hyman, the former chief executive officer and disgraced chief executive officer of Serco, coming down from the windows of the World Restaurant, breakfast meeting at the Risk Waters Group. He left everyone behind to fry. Well, that makes him, in my book, a disgusting human being, because he must know what went on on the 47th floor when he came down and made a presentation to the shareholders of Serco. And I believe the presentation he made, or what the shareholders of Serco were presented with, to their horror, was an opportunity to take a position in what's known as a catastrophe bond. And there are two positions you can take with a catastrophe bond. You can be on the sponsor's side, where you are concerned that you might be cleaned out because the catastrophe happens, or you're on the investor's side, where you believe you can make a very nice premium by collecting the sponsor's money because the catastrophe is not going to happen. And what was presented, I think, with very little time for them to make a decision, is that certain insiders of the Teachers' Pension Fund, and there are two Teachers' Pension Fund that are shareholders of Serco, that is TIAA, Teachers Insurance Annuity Association of the United States of America, which is the largest private pension fund in the world with over $1 trillion of assets under management. On the other side of the coin is the University Superannuation Scheme, which is the equivalent for faculty in the United Kingdom, which I think is £50 billion. So I would say today, those two teachers' pension funds are targets for fraud on a massive scale that most of the members don't even understand, right? And one of the best ways of defrauding the teachers' pension fund is putting them on the investment side of a catastrophe bond and then triggering the bond. And in the particular case of 911, the bond was triggered when both steel frame buildings came down, towers 1 and 2, through fire in events which had never seen any steel frame building collapse through fire. And then, of course, building number 7 came down. So to me, it's very obvious there was a very sophisticated organization that was capable of putting on the world's first live broadcast mass snuff film in human history and camouflaging it using advanced encryption. And I believe we can now prove to Mr. Sweigert, and what I'm asking Mr. Sweigert to do is, instead of mouthing off about you and me, that he uses his undoubted skills as a simulation hacking information technologist, an expert in S.H.I.T, to look at the possibility that the people who met on the 47th floor had been infiltrated through the back door, created perhaps subconsciously or negligently by someone like Sweigert, who is apparently recognized in the United States as an authority on hacking. He's written a book on ethical hacking. So I'd like him to tell us, could the state of Illinois, in its role on the Federal Bridge, and the state of Illinois in its role on Northwestern University IT partnerships, have been infiltrated so that a certain number of senior public servants, and let me just go on to the first paragraph of this letter from Sweigert to Mr. Maxine Brown. Sorry, it's not a Mr., it's a Mrs. or a Ms. Ladies and gentlemen, as you are aware, a Cambridge-educated forensic economist. Now, I don't know if he's throwing...
You've been promoted.
Well, exactly. I don't know if he's thrown that tattooed, there's a good term in English, but I won't use it, dork in Poland under a bus. But it seems like Mr. Sweigert has now recognized me as a Cambridge-educated forensic economist. Right?
Well, it's also not accurate, though. You weren't educated in forensic economy in Cambridge, so it's another example of him injecting fake news.
Well, it could be, I mean, Cambridge, yes, okay, but I'm not too polarized on that. A Cambridge-educated forensic economist has published evidence, good word, remember the second law of David Hawkins was related to crime scene investigation. Evidence is neither lost nor gained, Mr. Sweigert, at a crime scene investigation, but some evidence is always wasted, and you are wasting evidence, but I move on. Concerning the use of the UIC EVIL, that's the University of Illinois Chicago Electronic Visualization Laboratory, to distribute child murder films, in brackets video, to the senior staff of various federal agencies. Well, there, actually, Mr. Sweigert, you've nailed it. I do believe that these pornographers have distributed child pornography over the kind of network in which you are an expert hacker to various target senior staff, which might be members of the senior executive staff or senior executive service, launched by one of the charter members. There were 7 charter members of the senior executive service, which is Christine Marcy, in 1978 or 1979. Right? So this, if that is true, Mr. Sweigert, what you need to tell the public at large, your fellow countrymen, don't tell me because I know more than you think I know, right? If the state of Illinois was infiltrated with advanced encryption technology of the type that we've discussed, which is this amazing technology patented in 1997 in the 4th month, January, February, March, April. In April of 1997, about 4 months after a little girl was sodomized, garroted, tasered, and her skull was cracked right around. And she was the daughter of a man who was a Navy pilot, I believe, a former Navy pilot, by the name of John Benet Ramsey, who had received a bonus of $118,000 for his role at Access Graphics in equipping the Pentagon with the kind of technology that would allow the Pentagon to respond during an online continuity of government exercise appropriately to an incoming attack. So this little girl was tortured to death, and I believe using advanced technology to send images, possibly in real time, over these networks into, well, for example, some of the defense contractors on the Federal Bridge. That is to say, senior people in Lockheed Martin may have seen either live or very soon afterwards images of this little 7-year-old girl being tortured to death at midnight on Christmas Day of 1996, where collectively the media in the United States of America have wasted evidence. And that, for me, is unforgivable. Over to you, Jason.
Yeah, yeah. So, David, for some reason, these guys are desperate for people to believe that this Federal Bridge public-private key infrastructure is solely intended to process bank payments, but that seems odd to me. I don't know why this collection of groups would be together. I mean, I don't understand what the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and the state of Illinois Veterans Affairs have to do with Lockheed Martin. If this were just for banking, why isn't everybody on it? And it just doesn't make sense. We've got the United Kingdom Ministry of Defense, the Netherlands Ministry of Defense, the Entrust non-federal intermediary with access to the root of this whole thing. And furthermore, if what we're saying is incorrect or not worth listening to, why would these guys spend so much time talking about it and contacting all the people?
Yeah, can I just address that, Jason? I'll tell you what that network is. Just stay back with the Federal Bridge. It would be a superb instrument for processing a catastrophe bond fraud, right? Because you could have real-time data flowing around that network using this patent that was assigned to Lockheed Martin in April of 1997, which is the TDM bit spreading patent, and then reassigned, and this is vitally important, to British Aerospace in June of 2001. So I asked myself, why would Lockheed Martin give up its ownership, if that's the right word, or assigned rights in probably the most important patent? And of course, Sweigert can, with his enormous knowledge and experience in simulation, hacking, and information technology, he should be able to tell us if that transfer of the assignment of the time division multiplex bit spreading patent from Lockheed Martin to British Aerospace in June of 2001, would that have allowed British Aerospace to launch a man-in-the-middle attack over the Federal Bridge during a continuity of government exercise where someone maybe had custody of the Jerome Lemelson patent and switched friend to foe and foe to friend, so that there was total confusion in the Pentagon, and they thought that, or the missiles battery on the roof of the Pentagon treated the incoming missile as a friend,
Yeah.
because then it comes back to ground truthing. If Captain Gerald DeConto, the duty officer of the Pentagon's U.S. Navy Command Center, realized that the missiles on the roof of the Pentagon, and remember Towers 1 and 2 had been hit in New York, so he knew he was in trouble. If he recognized that whatever was coming his way, and it actually must have hit him between the eyes, was transmitting friend signals, and the battery of missiles on the roof of the Pentagon had switched off because it thought it was a friend. Let's say Captain Gerald DeConto gets on the blower or whatever it was, maybe some secure network, but being tapped by hackers, gets on the communication system to Gordon England, the Secretary of the Navy, and asks for permission to manually override the stops on the missiles on the roof so he could take out the incoming missile.
Whoop, David, did you freeze?
All that, as far as I know, it's exactly what happened.
David, you're freezing here for a moment. Can you hear me, David? Well, once again, it seems we're taking flack over the target. I will try to restore the connection with David.
Know.
Oh, David, we lost you there for a moment. Let me interrupt for just a moment, David, because we're almost out of time for our show here on YouTube and Periscope and Facebook and DLive and all of the platforms that we're on. We're going to invite our viewers, those who are currently watching on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, to join us in just under 15 minutes on patreon.com/reverse-CSI storyboards. That's your page, David, as well as patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. And of course, subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. We'll be back at 2 p.m. Eastern to conclude this discussion and continue asking questions about what possibly might be happening over the Federal Bridge and why this network of self-proclaimed ethical hackers and military veterans are so persistently making up lies and falsifying the things that you and I have said to implicate us in fraudulent civil litigation.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll see you there, David.
Okay, Jason, thank you very much. Talk to you later.
Thanks, everyone, for watching. We'll be back at 2 p.m. Eastern. Join us on Patreon and Subscribestar.